Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler, and thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Rover.com, the nation's largest network of neighborhood pet sitters and dog walkers. Go to Rover.com/travel and get $20 off your dog's first booking.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 505. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about lighthouses and beaches, scuba, and the spice trade as we go to the African country of Mozambique.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We'll hear more from our new sponsor, Rover.com, but first, let's talk about Mozambique. I'd like to welcome to the show Simon Lewis from Travel Concept Solution, who's come to talk to us about Mozambique. Simon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Before we start talking about Mozambique, let's put it on a map for people. We're in Africa, but where are we in Africa?
We're on the east coast of Africa, okay, just above South Africa. There's a long, thin country, about 2,500 kilometers long, that runs from Swaziland, South Africa, to the southern border of Tanzania.
And before we talk about why other people should go, why were you in Mozambique?
Well, I've been to Mozambique a couple of times, first in 1997, but I went there about 2 years ago for a month-long trip because I was there for a kind of business holiday trip where I spent a month in Mozambique traveling from the north to the south to some of the spots I've always wanted to go to. I was inspired to go to Mozambique because I saw an article in an in-flight magazine describing Maputo, the capital city of Mozambique, as the Havana of Africa, which it definitely isn't.
All right, we'll get to that in a little bit. Why should somebody else go to Mozambique?
Well, it depends what you're looking for, but Mozambique is an amazing country because it's so different to lots of other countries in southern Africa. It was Portuguese, for one. You know, the only other Portuguese country in Africa was Angola, of course. It had a long civil war, so it's very underdeveloped. It has amazing beaches, amazing diving, beautiful archipelagos and island, and obviously a little bit of Portuguese flair in Africa, which is kind of cool and interesting.
Now, I should have asked, What did they mean by the Havana of Africa, first of all?
It was interesting because, like, Maputo, when it was rated as one of the most beautiful cities in the world many years ago when it was called Lorenzo Marques before the Civil War. Because it was Portuguese, it has that sort of Portuguese European flavor.
Okay.
So it's very run down, but it does have some nice architecture and some nice buildings and things like that. But I would definitely not call it the Havana of Africa.
Not someplace to go for a good cigar.
No, definitely not.
And what kind of itinerary would you recommend for someone going to Mozambique?
Well, it's a big, long country, which is difficult to travel around. So it really depends on what you're looking for. You know, to get to Maputo, for example, from Johannesburg, you can obviously fly. If you're to go across land, there's a good bus service from Johannesburg to Maputo. If you wanted to drive, you can get to some very nice beaches in the southern part of Mozambique within 12 hours drive of Johannesburg. You know, bribery and corruption is very prevalent in Mozambique. So, you know, driving is not always the best option.
Especially driving on your own, I would assume.
Yeah, driving on your own wouldn't be the best option. You know, the general rule is in Mozambique, avoid the police if you see them because they will stop you and ask for money.
So Maputo in the very, very south, easier to get to. It's such a big country. It's such a long country. Is there a particular region that you'd say if you're going to be in Mozambique and you don't have time to do the whole thing, north to south, south to north, is there one region that you would say that's the region you ought to see?
Well, the very, very south, which is even further south than Maputo, that's very popular for diving and sort of water sports holidays and fishing trips and things like that. If you go about 5-6 hours north of Maputo, you can go to an area called Praia de Tofu, which is a nice beach, and it's close to a town called Inhambane. And Inhambane is an old Portuguese town. It's got some sort of Art Deco architecture. The beach Praia de Tofu is very nice for sort of diving holidays. You can do whale watching there, just beach holidays, and enjoying a little bit of beach holidays in Africa.
Okay. And you say that's north of Maputo?
That's about 6 hours. By bus, local bus, it'll take about 5-6 hours to get north of Maputo.
And you mentioned the diving in Mozambique being very good.
It's very good in Mozambique. There's another area a little bit further north of Praia de Tofu called Vilanculos. That has a very nice archipelago as well of islands where you can go on dhow trips, which is the local sort of sailing boat around the islands and things like that to these beautiful untouched islands. But generally, traveling in Mozambique isn't that easy because there are great lodges to go to, but the public transport isn't great. Often you will have to connect with a lodge to shuttle you from a bus stop or something like that, or, you know, basically have your whole trip planned by a travel company.
Now, I'm going to guess that you didn't decide that the first time you were going to go to Africa, you were going to go to Mozambique.
No.
So you had been in Africa before.
Yes.
For a significant period of time was my impression.
Well, the first time I went to Mozambique was 1997. That was a few years after the Civil War ended, and things don't happen quickly, so it was still very war-torn, and there was lots of potholes in the streets and things like that. Over the last decade or whatever, you know, people have built nice lodges in remote areas and eco-lodges aimed at diving and sort of beach holidays and things like that. But also, the country of Mozambique is basically split into two halves. There's the north and the south. Okay. If you wanted a completely unique experience in the very far north, you could fly into Pemba, which is the biggest town in the far north.
And we're almost up in Tanzania at that point.
Yeah. Then you can connect with sort of lodges or on small boats that take you to amazing historical islands on the Carimbas archipelago. And these islands were old spice trading islands. There's one particular that I visited called Ibo Island. IBO Island. That is amazing if you like a little bit of old Portuguese colonial culture. It's a very old island. It's basically derelict, but there's nice lodges on there and people stay on the island. Then you can do dhow trips and diving trips and things like that and have a really unique experience. And then further south from Pemba, there's the famous island of Ilha de Mozambique.
Okay.
And it's only 500 kilometers south of Pemba. And I've been experienced at traveling around Africa, and I thought that 500 kilometers would be very easy to do on local transport. It actually isn't. It actually isn't easy whatsoever. But Ilha de Mozambique is the reason I went back to Mozambique. Back in 1997, you can imagine the history. You know, this was pre-internet.
Right.
So people were just telling me about this amazing island called Ilha de Mozambique. And this island is where the oldest Portuguese building exists outside of Portugal. right? And it was the island the Portuguese settled in to start their trading routes with India. When Goa was a Portuguese colony, they used to govern Goa from Ilha de Mozambique. And the King of Portugal never went there, but they built a palace for him on the island. And the island is like 200 meters long. It's got very old Portuguese architecture. A lot of it has been rebuilt because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's just magical. Ilha de Mozambique. It's not very easy to get to. There's not a great deal to see there, but it's one of those things of, if you like a little bit of colonial history like me, that is really, really amazing. It's easy to get to from land because it's about 150 meters off the coast, so it's connected by a bridge, and there's amazing bits of architecture and culture on the island. So that is definitely a highlight.
So wasn't easy to get to the first time you were there, and then you went back. It still wasn't easy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Things in Mozambique don't happen very quickly. You used to hear about this mythical island in the far north of Mozambique called Ilha de Mozambique, or Mozambique Island, and the fact from the south it would take 4 days to get there by road.
Right.
But now it still takes 4 days to get there by road. You know, there's one main road that goes right up the coast of Mozambique. And this was confirmed to me a few months ago, that there's about 120 k's of this main road that you can only travel at about 20 kilometers an hour because it's that bad. So, yeah, Mozambique isn't an easy destination to travel to. But if you like something a little bit different in Africa, there's lots of cool things to see if you've got time.
And I'm curious, with the 2 different trips that you did, what surprised you the first time you were there, and then what surprised you when you came back?
Well, what surprised me the first time I was out, I'd travelled around Southern Africa quite a lot. And what surprised me was that a lot of the Southern African countries are very, very similar because of the colonialism in Africa.
Sure.
But when you cross the border into Mozambique, you realise you're somewhere different because everybody speaks Portuguese. You know, English is not widely spoken whatsoever.
Other than the language, though, were there other differences that you saw? I mean, was the diet the same, the scenery the same?
The scenery is pretty similar, but the beach is a lot more tropical, white sandy beaches, clear blue waters. You know, in 1997, when I first got there, you know, one of the things that you would buy off the children on the beach was raw pearls that they would literally pull off the beach. Yeah, so they like spicy food. So you get lots of seafood and spicy chicken.
Okay.
Yeah, so you get a really nice Portuguese mix of Africa.
Let's take a break here and hear from our sponsor, Rover.com. We love our dogs, but sometimes the travel bug calls and we have to leave our best friends behind. Rover.com is the nation's largest network of loving and trustworthy pet sitters and dog walkers. Discover and book the perfect pet care for you, your dog, and your budget on Rover.com. Browse profiles, read reviews, and find someone in your neighborhood who offers pet sitting, dog boarding, dog walking, or doggy daycare. Then book and pay all through Rover. It's that easy. With Rover, you can relax. Your dog is in good hands. Rover offers general background checks, and every sitter profile has been individually reviewed and approved. Rover's got you covered with cute photo updates, premium pet insurance, and 24/7 support. Visit rover.com/travel to get $20 off your dog's first booking. Go ahead, find someone who will love your dog while you're away at rover.com/travel. And then when you went back, biggest surprise?
When I went back, the biggest surprise was I hadn't changed much.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I got that impression that that's what you were going to say.
Yeah,
Okay.
on my second trip there, I really wanted to travel like from the north to the south and see it all and things like that. And these amazing places where you can go to are still very hard to get to. I went to a very nice lodge in the north, close to Ilha de Mozambique, and it was 150 kilometers to Mozambique, but it took 4 hours to get there because the roads are that bad. It's called Nauru Lodge, Naurro, something like that. But when you get there, it's this amazing eco lodge in the middle of nowhere. And you can dive straight off the beach. And there's a lot of places you can dive straight off the beach, but literally 20 meters off the beach, there's a ledge. And you just walk in your diving equipment and you can dive. And what even makes it more amazing that in whale season, whales come right into the beach because it's so deep there. Nobody actually knows how far this ledge is. So wherever you go, you see a little bit of Portuguese architecture and lighthouses and things like that. Because the way Portuguese colonized in Africa was that they set up trading points rather than the way that the British did it. So, you know, that's why Ilha de Mozambique has such old buildings on there, because that's where the Portuguese kind of like set up base there and governed their colonies from.
Well, and my impression was that they stayed more to the coast typically. Did you get a chance to get further inland in Mozambique, or were you mostly along that coastal route?
I've been along the coastal road, but I've been inland as well, because if you cross from Zimbabwe to Malawi, there's a road which goes through a town called Tete, Tete. And so it's called the Tet Corridor because during the Civil War there, it was the only protected road. So, the first time I went there was still tanks on the side of the road and things like that. But that's just like a hot dust ball. And the town was set up to start the trade of ivory out of the lower Zambezi to the coast so the Portuguese could ship it back to Europe. But there really isn't any main settlement on the inland of Mozambique. It's a very narrow country and everything goes along the coast.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you did not get the impression of Maputo that it was the Havana of Africa.
It's definitely a very cool city. It's famous for its nightlife and food and architecture. The movie Blood Diamond, there were some shots that were supposed to be West Africa that were filmed in Maputo. There's a famous train station. If you can Google Maputo's main train station, really old, glorious style Portuguese train station. That's something that always people go to visit. And the fish markets where you can have lunch and dinner and things like that.
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about the architecture and you mentioned that there was Art Deco architecture. I forget that colonization went that late, that it was relatively recent, that it was in my father's lifetime that, all of Africa was still colonies. And, I just forget that, but that sort of put that into context, knowing that that was an early 1900s architectural style.
Of course, yeah, because you got to remember, the war in Mozambique only ended in the early 90s, and it was a 30-year civil war.
Oh my! I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, and a lot of the South wasn't damaged till the very late part of the war. And the story was, you'd have to Google this and not quote me, but the story was that the Portuguese who were still there were ordered over the radio to leave. There was a radio announcement to leave. So they just left, and they left everything. It's a very cool city to hang out in. Being in an African city, it's a relatively safe city. You can walk around. It's perfectly fine to walk around. It's a lot friendlier than a lot of other places, but people are going to struggle if they don't speak Portuguese or Spanish. You can obviously get by with a bit of Spanish.
Are there sites that you would recommend people see, for instance, in Maputo?
The building that was created by, I'm going to sound silly now, the guy that created the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, sure. Eiffel.
Yeah, Eiffel, yeah. There's a building he created in Maputo. The train station is pretty impressive. The fish market to go and eat your prawns and your spicy seafood is very good. There's the Palana 5-star hotel, which is this old colonial style hotel, which is in perfect condition, overlooks the beaches and things like that. But yeah, Maputo is just a cool city, a reasonably cool city to hang out with and experience the nightlife.
Okay. Favorite market?
The fish market, definitely.
Okay. And then any great ways to come in contact with the culture or the arts?
I haven't got any real information on that, to be honest.
Okay. No problem.
The best source of information for a budget traveler for Maputo is Fatima's Backpackers.
Okay.
That's like the oldest backpackers in Maputo, and they handle all the transport.
So it's a hostel.
Yeah, it's a hostel, yeah. Lots of people use that place as just a stopover because all the transport runs very early in the morning to the north, so they handle all that transport for you.
Excellent. Best day you had in Mozambique?
Ilha de Mozambique, by far.
Okay.
Ilha de Mozambique, or the Carimbas Archipelago in the far north, because, sailing around the Carimbas Archipelago on a dhow is just amazing, seeing all the ancient Portuguese forts and things like that.
A dhow is a sailed vessel?
Yeah, an African dhow is like an Arabic-style sailing boat
with
the big white sails and things like that.
Like a felucca?
Yeah, similar, yeah.
Got it, okay.
Yeah. If somebody's traveling out of Mozambique and they want to go back to Southern Africa, you can easily get a bus to either, like I said, a mainline bus, like a sort of American-style Greyhound to Johannesburg, or you can also get like a local bus to Swaziland, and that's like 2 hours from the border.
Right. Well, it's right up against Swaziland. Right. And the other thing I was curious about is I see that one of the best-known national parks in South Africa, Kruger National Park, basically continues over into Mozambique as a national park. Did you had a chance to get up and see any of the wildlife?
I've been to Kruger National Park many times, but only on the South African side.
Okay.
The Mozambican side apparently doesn't have as much game.
Oh, interesting.
It's basically just a protected area because of poachers coming into South Africa, as far as I know.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter show. So before I get to my last questions, anything else we should know before we go to Mozambique?
Before you go, take US dollars.
Interesting.
Practice your Portuguese. You need to obviously get a visa for Mozambique, which you can get at the border, so be prepared for that. And the currency is meticas. So don't try and get meticas from your local bank.
All right.
Don't try and get Metzgas from your local bank, but you can use US dollars and change everywhere. The best beer is 2M, which is a number 2 and an M, and it's Deutsche M in Portuguese.
Okay. And then last 4 questions. You're standing in the prettiest spot you saw in Mozambique. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the sunset off the coast of Ilha Mozambique.
Okay.
My favourite place by far.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Mozambique.
All the spicy food and the terrible roads. You don't get a lot of spicy food in Southern Africa amongst the African communities, but in Mozambique, it's all spicy food.
Got it. Because of the spice route. Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Finish this thought. You really know you're in Mozambique when what?
You really know Mozambique when somebody walks up to you and says, "Hola, ¿cómo está? Todo bien?" Right. It's so strange when you go over the border and everybody speaks Portuguese. That's the real culture shock.
Okay. And if you had to summarize Mozambique in just 3 words?
A magnificent beach country and amazing Portuguese culture.
I think that was possibly more than 3 words, but we'll hold you to a magnificent beach culture there.
Magnificent beaches and spicy food.
Excellent.
There you go.
Excellent. Now, Simon, I don't believe you have a travel blogger. Is there any place you write about your travels?
I don't write about my travels. I'm more of a social media Instagrammer, so you can get me on Twitter @SimLewis, Instagram @SimLewis, and we do have a blog on travelconceptsolution.com.
Okay, and we didn't say Travel Concept Solution being a marketing firm that works in social media.
Yeah, we're a creative marketing firm. We work with online media, social media. We're based in South Africa, but we work in other countries, South America and Europe as well.
And you made a reference to it when you said you were doing a business pleasure trip, but the business part of that being trying to figure out how to promote things in Mozambique.
Yeah, the business trip that we did to Mozambique was for Ebo Island Lodge in that famous island in the top. We were there to sort of create some social media content for a festival they were having there. And also we looked at, they just got new Wi-Fi, so we wanted to promote that. And we actually looked at having a Google Hangout on the island to promote the island, but that never worked.
You mentioned festival, actually. I didn't ask you about festivals. Best time of year to go to Mozambique or best festivals?
Best time of year to go to Mozambique is actually in the African winter, European summer, because it's still very hot, but there's no malaria. And the rainy season is February, March.
Okay. And then festivals?
Festivals, off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the one that I went to, but it was an old festival just for the people of the islands. It was very small.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Simon, so much for coming on the show. Our guest again has been Simon Lewis from Travel Concept Solution. Thanks for coming on and sharing your love of Mozambique.
Thanks, Chris. Enjoy Mozambique. Cheers.
In news of the community this week, I heard from Iman on the Facebook group, the Amateur Traveler Facebook group, that is, who said, Algeria, Russia's Northern Caucasus, Kosovo, Mauritania, really enjoying the podcasts. Listen to Sudan, Colombia, Medellin, Panama, and Western Sahara episodes this evening. Great insights. I'm just exhausted listening to that whole list, let alone listening to all those episodes. Glad you're enjoying it, Iman. I heard from Kent about the episode we did recently on Utah. I just listened to episode 503, which was about the national parks in Utah. I made several trips to southern Utah and northern Arizona, most recently in December 2015. I keep going back because the land is so beautiful and different from my home in Virginia. I have some comments. Get ready for it to be hot if you stay in Moab, a great base for visiting arches and canyon lands in the summer. It was 95 plus at 11 p.m. when we visited in June. Dead Horse Point State Park is in between the national parks, and it has my favorite view of the Colorado River. No worries about the name. No horses, dead or alive, are in sight, but we did see a family of coyotes. The episode was about the national parks, but Dead Horse Park State Park is so close to Canyonlands Island in the Sky District that it makes sense to visit both when you're in the area. On our way out of Zion National Park, I noticed a pair of golden eagles landing near the road. I stopped to see them and noticed that the eagles were waiting their turn to eat a dead deer. They were waiting for a pair of California condors to leave. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is trying to expand the condors' range, so they released a pair with tracking radios. In Zion, wildlife sightings, elk, deer, coyotes, snakes, birds are common if you stay alert. As dry as it is, it's surprisingly teeming with animals. And Kent, I didn't even think to say that it would be hot in southern Utah in the summer because I just assumed that everyone knew that. But yes, especially at some of these places, quite hot. Not quite as hot in places like Bryce, which are up at altitude. But that is something to think about. That's why I did my trip in October. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. Don't forget to check out rover.com/travel. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave your comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And you can follow me at all the usual places on social media, or join Imam and I in the Facebook community, facebook.com/amateurtraveler. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
One more cathedral, I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should